What he didn't know, unfortunately, he couldn't see into her heart.
Welcome to District Attorney Michael Allen to Grizzly True Crime.
Hi, how are you?
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for being here for this amazing opportunity. I can't believe I get to interview you today.
Well, I can't believe I'm being interviewed by you. Thank you.
For those who don't know who you are, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your career?
Sure. So obviously my name is Michael Allen. I'm the DA in the 4th Judicial District, El Paso and Teller counties in Colorado. Prosecuted the Letecia Stauch case, which I think is what we're going to talk about today. Prior to being a prosecutor, I've been a prosecutor now for almost 20 years. I'm married, been married for it'll be 28 years, I think, this coming January. Got 2 sons, one that's a teacher and one that's in the Navy, U.S. Navy. And then prior to me being a prosecutor, I was in the Navy myself. I worked on F-18 radar and was stationed on an aircraft carrier. And I'm a Colorado native.
How do you feel now that this trial is over?
It's a sense of relief. It's something that, more so for Gannon's family, but even for the team that I had here in the office that were working on it. It was an emotional burden to deal with this case, just because of the horror of what Gannon had to go through. And so, from the very beginning stages of this case, you really want to just hold the person accountable. I'm not going to say her name, so hopefully you don't ask me to say her name, but it just becomes a part of you. And when a case drags on for as long as that case did, over 3 years, there wasn't a single day that would go by that I didn't have some thought about either Gannon or Gannon's parents. I live pretty close to the area where she dumped his body up in Palmer Lake area. It's not too far from my home, so I would sometimes see that area, drive by or whatever, and see the little memorial area that people had put up a little cross and blue ribbons and stuff like that. So it just was a daily part of my life. And that daily impact on me is just pales in comparison to the impact that it had on Al and Landon and all the people that love Gannon. So I can't even imagine knowing what the burden was for me, what it had to have been for them. It's just unimaginable.
Yes, I'm sure they feel very supported by you, though. You were such a rock, even just from us just viewing the trial as my community. Obviously, viewing the trial, we could see you were a rock and an anchor for them. So,
well, thank you.
In such a high-profile case, there must be tremendous pressure for you or on you. How do you cope with it, and what keeps you focused?
Yeah, I think the thing that you really latch onto as a prosecutor, you have to build up to these kind of cases in your career. You've got to take on other high-profile cases, but nothing like this magnitude, right? There's nothing that can really prepare you for the magnitude of this kind of a case that really drew international attention. That's pretty rare for this part of the country to have that sort of attention on one particular case. What you do is you just really focus on doing the things that you would do on any other case, making sure that the investigation is hitting all the points that it needs to hit, tying up any loose ends that might be out there that you're going to have to deal with long term, making sure that any questions are answered as the investigation is being carried out. And then really just focusing on the emotional side of it, making sure you're focusing on Gannon and being his voice in that investigative process, and knowing that at some point you're going to be in trial, and making sure that you're really squared away with anything that you're going to have to do in that trial process, and putting together the strongest possible case you can put together.
Are you wearing blue today intentionally?
Blue just happens to be my favorite color as well. That's why I've had the wall painted blue behind me. But that was, another connection that I felt with Gannon. I knew that his favorite color was blue, so I purposely during trial I would wear blue ties every day. I think I wore a blue tie every single day of that trial. That was purposeful.
We did notice. Yes, it was wonderful to see. Yes, everyone's like, "Oh my word, they're wearing a blue tie." It was just really nice to see.
Yeah.
How long does it take to prepare your opening statements, and what is your strategy for selecting key points to highlight?
It has to be based off of the case facts and what is going to be important. And we knew in this particular trial that it was going to be a big part of it was the mental health aspect of it. So really, for you that watched it, it was really focusing on those aspects and why her defense of not guilty by reason of insanity was complete nonsense. That was really the point of pointing, getting the jurors to think about that from the very beginning. And that process doesn't even start with opening statements. It actually started during jury selection, where we're talking about those issues through multiple days of jury selection, making sure that people understand what the issues are going to be, how to think about the issues, framing the facts for them as best we possibly could, and what's allowable under the law. So it starts even before opening statements, that strategic thinking about how you're going to deal with what we know to be really the most important issue in the trial.
And throughout the trial, does your strategy shift and change towards, of course, closing arguments?
Well, you're building up towards that closing arguments, and you have to really make sure that anything you want to talk about in closing arguments is something that comes in as evidence in the trial. So, we've got checklists that we're keeping during the trial, making sure that each piece of evidence comes in that will then support the ultimate argument that you're going to make at closing arguments. But really, you've got to be consistent straight down the road every single time and with every single witness. And that's why you probably noticed that we were asking a lot of the same questions with each witness as a concluding questions, did she have any mental health issues that you knew about? Could she form intent and those kind of things? That was very intentional that we were doing that with every single witness that she knew, because we were building towards that ultimate conclusion of this is a bunch of baloney. She doesn't have any mental health issues. She's just a cold-blooded killer, right?
Was it part of your strategy to have intelligence analyst Kevin Clark as your final witness with his comprehensive timeline that, from our view, put all doubt to rest about the defendant's actions?
Yeah, that was part of our strategic thinking. And it even became more important as we're going through trial, because what happened was you can't ever anticipate how many questions the defense is going to ask of each witness. So they can either make the trial and the witnesses take longer because they ask a lot of cross-examination questions, or they maybe decide they don't want to ask very many questions, and then this trial speeds up. So that happened in our trial in this case. We had to then start shuffling witnesses up out of order that we had originally planned for. And that made it more confusing. Things were coming in, not necessarily chronologically. And so the idea that we were going to use Kevin as the last witness was always the plan, but it became even more important when things were coming in more fragmented pieces and not necessarily in order. And I think it really helped tie everything together and really tell the story from beginning to end. And Kevin, I'm a huge Kevin Clark fan. I always have been. And, that question and answer process that we went through with him as the final witness was just, I think it was perfect, putting a bow tie on the whole thing.
It really was. And we're all Kevin Clark fans over here too. And that timeline, I mean, our jaws were on the floor, like, oh my word, this till last. I mean, if the jury had any questions after that, not so much. Yeah.
And that timeline, actually, what people don't really know is that timeline was a pared down version of the original timeline. There were so many other entries that are on the full timeline that we couldn't get into at evidence because, maybe foundationally we couldn't get a witness there or whatever. But still, obviously, it tied everything together really well. And we have, I think Kevin might have talked about this with you. We have a room that we were using as trial prep room. And the original timeline stretches around that room on the walls more than one time. It's the most intense timeline I've ever seen. And I've been doing this for a long time.
Okay, so we're not wrong that we mean this is one of the best and most comprehensive timelines we've seen. That was,
Yeah,
and it was the
absolutely.
condensed version that we saw, as you say. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
And was it challenging to have to keep information to yourself when Gannon's family had questions during the investigation and leading up to the trial?
Yeah, that was a big challenge. I would meet with them a lot. I can't even tell you the number of times that I met with them throughout the years that we had to deal with this case. And sometimes they would have questions about specific things, and I would always tell them that please know that if I'm protecting information, it's because I want to protect our ability to get a conviction in this case. I would tell them some things and ask them not to share, and they did a really good job of holding the information that I gave them in confidence to themselves. Um, if they had, if they had gone the other way and maybe were sharing things publicly, that could have had dire consequences on the prosecution effort. It's really important that when we're in this mode of trying to go for the ultimate conviction, that we're being protective of the information so that we're not impacting somebody's ability to have a fair trial. That's the other part of what a prosecutor does is obviously we want to convict somebody that did something wrong, but we also want to make sure that they have a fair process so that it doesn't get overturned on appeal. And that sort of plays hand in hand with that idea.
Exactly. And do you anticipate an appeal in this case? And if that happens, then what?
Yeah, there will be appeals in this case. There always are, especially cases like this that somebody is convicted of a high level offense. There will be appeals. The good thing is, though, is that I think we did a really sound job at trial. I don't think that there was anything that's going to give us any problems. So I feel very confident that this conviction will hold up on appeal. They will come, but we'll be ready for those too.
When I recently interviewed a district attorney from Texas, he said that the prosecution and the defense, they're kind of like sports teams, like opposing sport teams, that you're not really friends. Is that the same for you? Would you say the same in this trial, for example?
Yeah, so I think it kind of depends on the people that are involved. I do have friends that are defense attorneys. I'll even sometimes socialize with some of those folks. Have fun and sort of cut loose a little bit. But it really depends on the relationships. I have good relationships with both of those attorneys that were the defense in this case. In fact, a little known piece of trivia is that Josh Delaney and I both went to high school together. We didn't know each other in high school. We didn't figure that out until years later. But yeah, so yeah, I the thing that I always latch onto as a prosecutor is that they're just doing their jobs as defense attorneys. They have an important job. It's very much a big part of what makes the criminal justice system work. That they're providing good, honest representation to their client. So, I don't ever hold that against them or be offended by the things they're doing unless it's something unethical. And I don't think that ever arose in this case. Obviously, I know that there were some questionable things being said about maybe one of the attorneys, but that sometimes just comes with trials, especially a long trial. The longer the trial is, the more challenging it's going to be in the courtroom in that pressure-packed environment when you're in there for weeks on end. That makes it even tougher sometimes. But I've got good relationships with both of them.
Okay, great. And how confident were you that the jury would find the defendant guilty in this case?
Um, that I've never felt more confident in the facts of the case than I did with this particular one. And that's because of just the nature of the evidence that we had in this case. It was just so comprehensive. But sometimes people will say things like, well, you had a slam dunk case. I don't ever think any case is slam dunk. Whenever you're talking to 12 random people that you sort of snatch out of their daily lives and you make them sit in a courtroom and listen to things that they don't want to have to listen to. These are things that nobody wants to hear. You never know what a group of random people is going to do as a collective group on a jury. So there's no such thing as a slam dunk case, but I felt very confident about the facts that we had here. I felt very confident about my preparation level, the preparation level of my team. And so, I felt really confident with that caveat of there's no such thing as a slam dunk.
And were you at all slightly worried when the defense team brought in a mental health specialist? That sways somebody.
Yeah. I was not impressed by her at all. just to be very blunt. I thought she was, I've dealt with a lot of expert witnesses over the years, including defense expert witnesses that have been brought in. And then I've also dealt with even more lay witnesses. And in my opinion, she was the absolute worst witness I've ever seen testify in a case. The things that she was doing was very intentional and misleading, I thought. When she's pulling out notes that she's just said that she doesn't have, and then she's in the middle of testimony pulling papers out and said, "Oh, here's the note right here." She was horrible, and I think that that was reflected in what the jury's verdict was. We were able to talk to one of the jurors afterwards, and I think they felt the same way, that she was just completely nonsensical, and it's surprising that she would get on the stand and say and do the things that she was doing.
Right. We just all got worried for a second there because of the 12 random people, like, oh no, what if somebody thinks that this is real, that she really does have DID, because with the different hairstyles and the way that, the defendant was behaving. And then this lady, oh man, for a second there, that's why it was so great. You brought in that timeline. So good.
Well, you mentioned the hairstyles and the way that she was acting. That was all an act too. This particular defendant is so misleading. And so manipulative, right? Every person that's charged with high level crimes is manipulative to a certain degree. She was the most manipulative defendant I've ever dealt with, and we saw that during trial, the way that she was acting when the jury was in the room. I found out after the fact from that juror that we talked to that she was actually trying to communicate with the jurors during trial. She was mouthing things to them and giving them hand gestures, and they were all taking note of that. They were seeing it, and they felt like she was trying to manipulate them as well. But when we're in court and the jury's in there, she's acting one way, the way that people would see, and then as soon as the jury would leave, she was normal again. So it was very stilted, made up actions by her, and really trying to manipulate the process.
Yes, in our community we called it bird watching, with her flipping the bird all the time. There were some that were bird watching just to see when she does it or when she's making little hearts and things.
Well, yeah, and that's a funny thing too. I knew that people were paying attention to this case, but I didn't know the level of people, I guess the volume of people that were watching it. And then we started getting messages. I was getting direct messages. I don't know how people got my direct information, but we were also getting it at the office with pictures of her flipping the bird watching thing. And that's when it really dawned on me that there was this intense viewership that was watching what was happening in the courtroom. And that made it different for me as a prosecutor too. It was almost like, in a sense, almost like you're on reality TV, right? That there's all these people watching everything you do. So no picking your nose or anything like that, right?
None of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, as you say, that must feel very different. Especially now, these days, it's happening more and more and more. This will be a growing problem. Hopefully it's not a problem. Do you think it's a problem?
Yeah. No, I think transparency is good. I think, the U.S. Constitution says that people get to have a fair and open trial. And what they mean by open trial is that the courtroom doors have to be open for people to walk in. And really, that's what this opportunity is, right? That the virtual doors are open so that people can watch from all over the world. And I think that's a good thing.
So as we discussed, there's an enormous amount of data and information to prepare for a trial. So how do you personally chunk and organize and prepare all of it? And how do you decide what is most important to share with the jury?
Yeah, the benefit for me was that I was on this case from within the first few days. And so I was organically learning all of these facts as they're actually occurring. That was really good. Kevin came on a few days after I did, when Colorado Springs Police Department loaned him over to the investigation. And that organic nature of learning a case and living it every single day really embeds those details in your mind and makes them very real. But then you've got to parse out the stuff that matters and the stuff that doesn't matter, because when you've got over 20,000 pages of investigative reports and all of the digital evidence that we had in the case, you've got to really cut away all the extra and really focus in. That was tough on this case because there just was so much data. It's hard to really narrow it down and make it make sense in a way that is going to be impactful for a jury. And you just have to look at each thing. How does it fit into the bigger picture? And how do you then present that to a jury? What witnesses do you need to get that particular little fact out? That was a big challenge because there might be multiple witnesses. As an example, the person that we had testify, Macon Ponder, the bridge inspector, there were actually two guys that we talked to that were involved in finding Gannon. And it was really just listening to them remember what happened, what their memories were of finding Gannon, and then who we think would be best able to communicate that impact to a jury. And Macon was fantastic. Think about that too, the impact on Macon. I know that there are people that have said this, but to just be going about your regular day and then to find a child's body in a suitcase, he'll never get past that. That's going to be something that's going to be in his mind for the rest of his life. But really, it's trying to narrow that down and who can help us tell the story the best. Yeah.
And also, former detective Jess Bethel.
Yeah.
I mean, the impact it had on her as well. I mean, I believe she resigned after the case.
She did. Yeah, she did. I mean, just think about all the efforts that she went through on this particular case, and including having to fight her on the highway in Kansas, when they're speeding down the highway and they have to slam on the brakes and then get into a physical struggle with her. And I don't remember if this came out or not, but the defendant, when that happened, was actually trying to also grab one of the detective's guns. Can you imagine what would have happened then?
Oh no, we don't want to know. Luckily, that didn't happen. They were very good as well. Pounced on her.
Yeah.
What was the worst or most challenging part of this trial for you?
This is easy, and I hope I can get through it. It's the emotion of it, keeping your emotions level. Because I'm a parent. I've got two boys that, and I could see Gannon is just kind of like my kids when they were that age too. So it became personal in that respect, and keeping those emotions in check so that you can be effective and not lose sight of what you're doing was, for me, the biggest challenge. When we get to Kevin's testimony, it went for quite a while, right? And one of the family members, I'll show you here in just a second, but one of the family members in the middle of his testimony, we're coming back from break, and she comes over and gives me this bag, and it happens to be this little teddy bear that they'd made, and it was made out of Gannon's clothing. So that's this. When that happened, it was hard to get my composure back. Actually, as we started after that break, it was I really, the emotions were welling up, and I had to tamp that down. So to me, that was the biggest challenge, is staying level and making sure that we were able to present the evidence that was important to the jury and not lose yourself in that emotion. Because if you do, then you're at a huge disadvantage. You're not thinking strategically.
That is so true. So a huge emotional and psychological shield. Does that shield ever, like when you get home at night or even after the trial, does that come off? Do you then sometimes have to process all of that?
Yeah, it's the same thing that I think everybody goes through when they're dealing with any emotions. We've all got our natural human reaction to different things. You just got to be healthy about it. It can be overwhelming at times, but not turning to things that are unhealthy. Making sure that you're staying physically fit and eating right and getting good sleep and that kind of thing. But yeah, there would be times when I'd get home and my wife was following the case a lot. She's I should add, very excited to see this. She was excited to hear that you were interviewing me today. But we would have talks sometimes, and it was tough to deal with, but you just have to do it in a healthy way. And I know everybody on the team was going through the same thing. The hardest part dealing with that would be the waking up in the middle of the night, go to bed at regular time, but then you'd wake up at 1 or 2 in the morning and things would start going through your mind about the case, and then you can't fall back to sleep. And that's happening during trial. That adds that pressure too, and making sure you're sharp mentally can be tough when that's going on.
Yes. And what was the best part of this trial for you?
Hearing that guilty verdict.
Right. And the judge's sentencing was so intense. It was so good. Some judges don't do that. They just sentence them but that speech was good, right?
Oh, Judge Warner has always been one of my favorite judges. He's very fair. He treats, both sides with the dignity and respect that both sides deserve. He makes good, sound legal rulings. That's also good for appeal purposes too. If you've got a judge that's making bad rulings, that can have impacts on appeals. But he was very sound on that front. And then, when he's dropping the thunder on her with his remarks at sentencing, that was fantastic to hear.
Yes, very passionate. I'm sure he took a while to prepare that,
Yeah.
the sentencing speech as well. If you had one message for how we, the public, can honor Gannon's memory, what would that be?
I would say, we've all seen the picture of Gannon, different pictures actually of Gannon smiling. I think it's that he was just an innocent kid, and those pictures capture that perfectly. He didn't deserve this at all. We all know that. He deserved so much more out of the defendant, who was supposed to be protecting and caring for him. We showed that video of sort of that audio video recording where she's manipulating him and he's crying and talking about his burns. We had another video that we didn't actually play that was very similar to that. It was taken some time before, but it's very similar, where she's manipulating him and he's crying on the video, and she's talking bad about Al and Landon, and he deserves so much more in life, and he certainly deserves our dignity and respect that we can give him in death too, and honoring his memory and remembering that smile that he had and the personality that, I obviously didn't know him in life, but I feel like I do, and we owe that to him.
Absolutely. We'll continue to share those beautiful smiling pictures of Gannon. And
Yeah,
his favorite
yeah.
color, we're all sharing, blue hearts.
Yeah,
and wearing
I noticed
blue.
you're all wearing blue too, so
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, I got this specifically for the trial for Gannon's case, the
Oh,
blue
did you?
heart. And
Yeah.
so also, how many times did you have to listen to those calls?
Oh my goodness, those calls, right? They were. I felt bad actually when we're in the middle of trial and we're playing those calls, because they're just so maddening to listen to, right? We had to listen to him way too many times, and you that screechy voice that she would use in those calls would just get on your last nerves. And but we had to get them ready for trial, so we were making sure that we were cutting out things that were inadmissible things of the video or of the calls. There wasn't too much of that, but way too many times. If I ever hear her voice again, will be way too soon. I don't want to hear that again.
Oh, we agree.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And what's next for you?
Well, I'm an elected DA. I'm the DA for a big area of the state. It's the 4th judicial districts for El Paso and Teller counties. I'm up for re-election here soon, so I'll be getting through that and then dealing with any other high-profile cases that unfortunately will strike. We know that they will. We just got done dealing with the Club Q shooting, which was a big impact case. I was lead on that. So anything that's going to be big, that's a big high-profile community impact case, I'll be on that for sure. And then the downside to doing this job is the politics side, but it's something you have to do if you're committed to this work. So.
Okay, well, just know everybody from all over the world loves and supports you from this community.
Oh, well,
we're rooting for you. We hope you get elected again.
Well,
if you want to be.
What? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't be running if I didn't want to be. If people want to, they can contribute to my campaign.
Okay, how do they do that? Hopefully we can get some links and things.
Yeah, so it would just be by visiting my campaign page, which is michaelallen4da.com.
Okay, I'm definitely going to be sharing that with him.
Well, thank you.
We're gonna vote you in. All the Grizzlies, we're directing them that way.
All right.
So just 3 bonus questions.
Yeah.
My community loved the way that you pronounced Tiguan.
Yeah.
Could you say it for them?
You want me to say it the real way or the way that I miss?
The way that you say.
Well, so the funny thing is that this is another outgrowth of the community watching, is that apparently that became a big thing on the internet, right? And so somebody sent me a T-shirt with my face on it, and it says Tiguan.
Tiguan, oh man. Somebody actually made that. They've been begging me to make it. I'm like, we will not be disrespecting District Attorney Michael Allen, but we love that you said it like that. Tiguan. So if you could say it.
Yeah, Tiguan.
We're going to clip that. Tiguan.
Yeah.
So at some point we said Tiggy Juan because, of the other stories, Eduardo and this one.
Right.
And
yeah.
We were like, oh, Tiggy Juan maybe, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe Tiggy Juan was involved, yeah.
Right? We just love it. Sometimes these little, it's such a heavy topic that sometimes moments like that just kind of make our day. So thank you for that.
I mean, that's a good outlet. That's one of the things that we would do during trial too, is that something might happen in the middle of trial, and then we'd come back for lunch or on a break and we would laugh about it. When, I don't know if people realize this, but when Dr. Lewis was testifying, her son was in the courtroom, and he would sneak out and go smoke marijuana in the stairway of the courthouse. And he'd come back and smell, reeking of marijuana smell. So that was a big funny thing that we were dealing with during trial that probably not everybody realized. But just those funny things that were happening, you just blow off steam that way.
Yeah, there were many of them. Even Will Cook rocking on that chair when we were like, that chair's about to break.
Yeah.
He would rock so much. He looked like he was almost like soothing himself, sitting next to that defendant, like shame.
Yeah, he probably did have to soothe himself sitting next to her for all those weeks.
He probably did. And there was one clip, I don't know if you've seen that, otherwise I could send it to you, where he literally should go close to him and he sanitized his hands and then his face.
Oh my goodness, no, I didn't see that.
It was so good. Oh man. Wow. And then also another one we enjoyed was that the judge really seemed to enjoy the perimeter lights in the courtroom. Were those a new installation?
No, those have been there for quite a long time. Yeah.
The way that he said it, we were like, that's definitely new. Perimeter lights on.
No, yeah. So that I've done other trials in front of him. He's really good at helping us control the lighting. So when we're putting things on the board that people can see them well. Yeah, that's been there for a long time.
We loved it. Perimeter lights on. And then lastly, are there any other behind the scenes moments from the trial that you are able to share with us?
Yeah. From my perspective, the biggest disappointment, I think, for me was that she didn't get on the stand. There was a lot of time that had gone into preparing to cross-examine her, and I was really looking forward to that. I wanted to make her really own up to what she had done and had put together some good ways to do that. And so I was disappointed that she chickened out and didn't get up there on the stand and let people see what she was really all about.
Mm-hmm. Although it'd be there for days.
Yeah, we would have been there for quite a while. Yeah. I think people would have probably, like your audience, I think would have really enjoyed seeing her sort of face the music.
Definitely. Did that Eduardo person ever exist? Because we were debating about that for a while. Never. No. Not anyone in the neighborhood.
No, actually, that was a big thing when that was coming out, where she's saying that she was raped by an Eduardo. There was effort to go see if there was a real person like that. So they went around, and there was construction crews in that area. They were building houses at that time. So they went around and asked everybody, and there was nobody like that. And obviously we know from Ring doorbell cameras and stuff like that, nobody went into the house. So it quickly fell apart. But one of those things in the investigative process that we had to tie up that loose end.
Right. For us, the craziest story was the pregnant, not pregnant cash belly lady.
the money belly. Yeah.
That one. We were like, oh man, those stories.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Any message for the Grizzlies?
Keep doing what you do. You've got an awesome show. You've likely got an awesome audience if they're watching you the way they do. So keep doing what you're doing. I know that through this process, you've got more fans here in Colorado Springs too. My wife and some of her friends are big fans now. So thanks for doing this the right way. That's one thing I think that's important to point out too is, after we got done with trial, we saw some other people that were not treating Gannon with dignity and respect, that were sort of true crime channels, right? Who wanted to make money off of, pictures and stuff like that. So I just wanted to congratulate you and thank you for doing it the right way. We can see the dark side of humanity from people that do it the wrong way. But from everything I've seen, you do it the right way and you're part of the light of humanity. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. I mean, people sometimes they think I'm a snowflake, right? They call me that because I'm so sensitive, but I'd rather be sensitive than not. I mean, when the court for a little bit there streamed the photos, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it took 4 seconds for me to block that out. There's no way you can just, and they say, but the court showed it, so we can show it. You can't. If you care about the victim, you just can't do that.
Yeah. I think that's the thing is that let's keep our focus on that. These are actual humans. Their lives have been impacted. We've got a little boy who's been brutally murdered. We've got parents that are having to deal with the loss of their little boy. And so if we can give them that little measure of dignity and respect, I think it goes a long way and helps us as a collective humanity to not get into that dark side of things.
I mean, were the family in the courtroom at the time when they showed those photos? Because my understanding was that they were not, were they?
They were not. Yeah.
They were not. Yeah.
So one of the things that I always talk about with victims is I give them the option. Do they want to see that kind of stuff or not? Some they want to see the autopsy photos or whatever. I always caution them though that, kind of like what I said earlier, remember your family member the way that you remember them. Remember the good times. So for Al and Landon and the rest of the family, I really encourage them to remember Gannon Smile, like I mentioned here today, and not to see those things, because once you see those things, they never leave your memory. I'll never forget those images of what Gannon, the condition he was found in, and the autopsy and that kind of thing. So what we do is we make sure that our victim advocate knows when those pieces of evidence are coming up, and then they'll tell the family, and then the family can either put their heads down and not look or go outside in the hallway. And that's what they chose to do, was go outside in the hallway until we were done with that portion of evidence testimony. So, but still, if these things are on the internet, like what we talked about, they could inadvertently see them and without having any choice in the matter. And that's just wrong, I think.
If people can see, whoa, okay, the court's showing this, but the family's not in the courtroom, that would be a sign of protect the family, protect the victim, protect the family. Why would you just stream their son's autopsy picture? And then go further and get I was one of them that got the FOIA request, but I was after Kevin Clark's timeline. I want that timeline. I'd been asking him, can you just send me your timeline? I just want the timeline. He was just like, oh man, okay, like the timeline, just make the request. I'm like, I'm making it. And I mean, my reaction when I got the file was like, why? I was actually on the Sunday before the other stuff happened with the other YouTuber. I was like, Miss Goody Two Shoes up in the email, like, listen, the risk of this is this, and why is it in here? And I can't believe it. I mean, I won't ever unsee it. I can't imagine the process of being like, oh, look at this. Now let me offer this as a perk. I can't imagine it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for using discretion and respect towards the family on that.
Yeah, we got to protect them. I'm very protective of families in my community. Victims and their families, like that's number one for us.
Well, maybe you should start working in a prosecutor's office, because it sounds like you would be a perfect addition. Maybe you should move out here and join our office.
Coming to Colorado.
Yeah.
Right. Look at my flat. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to interview you today. It's a highlight for me, and I know it's going to be for my community as well. I hope you'll read the comments, because they're going to leave lots of comments for you.
Oh, will they? Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to talk with you about it. I appreciate the way that you've covered this thing, and just keep doing what you're doing and continue to do it the right way, like we just talked about. So thank you.
You have a Grizzly True Crime mug?
Yeah, make sure everybody gets your Grizzly True Crime mug.
Oh my goodness. Okay, day made, you're made.